It has been told to me at least twice now that as a trusted servant, I serve the groups and do what they ask regardless, even if it means going against a tradition. Isn't that being faceless automation, the leadership essay speaks of? As leaders, should we stand up for the traditions when necessary, even if it goes against the group's wishes? Um, so I just want to be careful how I answer this. Um, if you're talking about your group or the wherever you are took a vote and you thought the vote went against the tradition, the group conscience weighs out. I mean, the group has the right to be wrong, but let me just clarify that. Sometimes people think it says the group has the right to be wrong and that makes them right. They're still wrong. They just have a right to be. However, if it's not a vote situation, if it's a group wants you to do things as a leader, yeah, you don't do anything that goes against the traditions. And you speak up and you speak up loud. So, all right. Can you explain the difference between AAWS and the General Service Board? Where does Grapevine fit in? Yeah, great question. So, okay. So, there's enough information in my head about these three entities and their bylaws and their tax returns and everything else. So I'm going to try to keep it really basic. On the spiritual level, the General Service Board takes their orders from the conference, the General Service Conference. The General Service Board is 21 trustees, 14 alcoholic, 7 non-alcoholic. The General Service Board is good to look at as kind of like the holding company, kind of like the parent company. And the parent company has two spiritual subsidiaries. I want to stress that. Spiritual subsidiaries. The AA World Services Inc. company and the AA Grapevine Inc. company. That's where all the business gets conducted. The General Service Board is the 21 trustees and their committees. They don't have any employees. We give money to the General Service Board. That's who we make contributions to. They move money over to AAWS to carry out the work. AAWS, AA World Services, has two primary functions: the service office and publishing. So they publish all the literature, director of publishing, the editors, the translators, the order takers, whoever. And then the service office, the corrections desk, the archives, the finance, the group services, the treatment desk, the international convention. If you want to see an easy way to see on paper, where the concepts really and the traditions come into play with this, if you were to go online one night and go to aa.org website, you could make an electronic contribution to the General Service Board, the debit card or your routing number or whatever. Let's just say you made a $5 contribution. If you have an app on your phone or access to your credit card or debit card, you would see within seconds a pending transaction and a receipt from the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's who we give money to. Now, if after you did that, you went to the literature catalog section and you decided to buy a big book and have it shipped to you, and you used your debit card, you would see in the pending transaction a receipt from AA World Services, Inc. We pay AAWS for literature. We make contributions to the General Service Board. The AA Grapevine is the other spiritual subsidiary, and they publish the Grapevine magazine, the podcast, which their new app came out. It's awesome. Came out last week. I love it. They really did a good job. Who's on these boards? Well, the General Service Board is 21 people. They get together 4 times a year, but really 3. One of the times is very ceremonial, the General Service Conference. The General Service Board does its work July, October, January, gets together for a weekend, a board weekend, we call it, which is like a drinking weekend. Starts on Thursday, ends on Monday. It's not what other people consider a weekend. It's what we consider a weekend. AAWS and the Grapevine get together 8 times. Those boards are not 21 people, they're 9. The AAWS board is the general manager of GSO, staff coordinator, so 2 employees are on the AWS board, then 4 trustees, usually 2 regional, 2 general service, and then 3 what we call non-trustee directors. That sounds a little complicated, so I'll try to make it easy. Out of the 14 alcoholic trustees, there are 3 types of alcoholic trustees. There are regional trustees. We're in the Southeast region. Your trustee is Tom H. He's a good golfing buddy of mine. He's always down here golfing with me. Regional trustees are elected by the region and the board at the General Service Conference. They don't technically represent the region. They're not like a senator. It's like a delegate. They vote for the best in AA. They also keep in contact with the region and with your delegates. And Tom has monthly meetings that Carrie, your delegate, goes to online. Then there are at-large trustees. That's the second group of the 14 alcoholic. 1 from Canada, 1 from the US. They're members of the Board of Trustees. Their primary function is they are our representatives to the World Service Meeting every 2 years, where all the GSOs from all over get together and share experience. The trustee at large US and the trustee at large Canada, those are our representatives. They also sit on the Trustees International Committee, and they do some international travel to other structures. The other type of alcoholic trustee is called the General Service Trustee. That's what I was. In order to be a General Service Trustee, you have to have been a non-trustee director. So when I just said AAWS has 9 people, 2 employees, 4 trustees, and then these 3 non-trustee directors. That means I was on the AWS board, but I was not a trustee. I was not on the board of trustees. Those 3 people have to be sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, have to have some service experience. You don't have to be a past delegate, but you have to have a particular business skill to bring to the board, because the AWS board is responsible for keeping the financial health and the business side of the organization in good shape. So that's where you get accountants, lawyers, IT professionals, business executives, publishers. The Grapevine board is the same way. They have 3 non-trustee directors. Now, legally, it's a convoluted kind of mess. Legally, there are no subsidiaries. Spiritually, yes. Spiritually, those boards report to the General Service Board, even though they don't want to act like they don't. Legally, they are totally independent, 3 separate New York corporations. What they have in common is, so when I was on the AWS board for 4 years, from 2009 to 2013, if you looked at that org chart, I just had my spot. I was a member of the board of directors of AA World Services. But when I became a trustee, because of the type of trustee I was, I continue for another 4 years as a director on AWS. So I was on AWS 8 years. But I also now have become an owner, which in our bylaws, we use the word member with a capital M if you're reading the bylaws of the General Service Board. The 21 trustees are the owners of each of those corporations. That's how we keep ownership like all together. The companies don't own each other, but they all have the same owners. So legally, I was a 121st owner of the AWS, a 121st owner of the General Service Board, a 121st owner of AA Grapevine. And what do I get to do with that ownership? Every year I get to elect the board of directors of AWS and AA Grapevine. I don't get to take my 121st with me. I don't get to sell it while I'm there and see what I can get for it. I sign a lot of papers when I take that position that when I leave being a trustee, I leave being a member of all three corporations. Is a company. It's a nonprofit organization in New York. AA World Services Inc. is a company. AA Grapevine Inc. is a company. What I mean by owner, it would be like if some construction company down the road had 21 crazy family cousins who were the owners, right? Like they're the actual owners, they're the shareholders. Yeah. Now, spiritually, which we don't like to talk about, and I don't want to go on a tangent about maybe how the board's been operating the last couple of years, but spiritually, it's clear in the service matter. The shareholders are the groups. That's the shareholders. And they exercise their proxy votes through the 93 delegates. Nope. I'm a member of a young people newcomer group with 5 core people. How do we make service more attractive? I mean, it's a great question. I don't go to it, so I would just be throwing darts in the air. But one of the things, and I'm stealing this from someone else that I heard say at an event I was at like a year and a half ago, but it was a meeting that was a long time, and they decided that their night and their time did not work in 2022. It was based on what was best for all of them and their community in like 1960 something when the group started. And they decided, you know what? We're going to find another date, another night of the week and time to meet. And that group became more active. I also don't judge groups by the amount of people. I just don't believe we're in a numbers game. But I would find a way as to the other thing. Sometimes what happens with groups that have, there's kind of like there's a separate culture, or I should say, group inside AA, which is newcomers. Newcomers, when you talk to someone who's been sober a while and you talk to them about when they were new, they went to meetings like I hear people argue 90 and 90 is not in the big book, but it's good. I don't even care what it is. The people I got sober with went to like 890, right? They were complete disasters and they had nowhere else to go and no jobs, and they went to a million meetings. So you didn't even have to argue the 90 and 90. But there is a separate subculture in AA of new people. That people who are here a long time that are maybe going to 2 or 3 meetings a week and their service commitments are not part of. Like that underground subculture of newcomers is real. I mean, they're together all the time. Sometimes I have a sponsee who asked me a question because he was they were very taken aback that 2 people in AA who they knew well with a lot of time were friends with each other. And they were taken aback because they really agree with the one person's AA and they can't stand the other person. And they were devastated when they found out the person they agree with is really, really good, close friends with the other person. And I had to explain to them because those 2 people have a bond that you can't break. They were in the foxhole together. They came in together. They were running around smoking cigarettes in diners to 2 o'clock in the morning, doing God knows what else, when they had no money between all of them. And, one of the things I've heard people say is, how do we get in touch with that newcomer population? Where do we have to go to let them know about meetings? I'm laughing because I read this because I recently I was at a service event, and one of the questions was about what do we do about new trusted servants who don't know how to read cursive? Laughing my ass off, right? Like laughing my ass off. What do you think about encouraging my groups I serve as a DCM to get committee reps like they show on page 9 pamphlet to attend monthly district committee meetings? I think it's awesome. I think whoever asked this question, it's awesome. I mean, there's nothing like sometimes I think that everybody has a gift in AA. Not everyone's going to be a great delegate or a great trustee. Not everyone's going to be a bad delegate or a bad trustee. But like people have their niche. Some people are really good at answering phones at interviews, like really good. Like they could talk an alcoholic off a ledge like nobody's business. Sometimes I think we kind of just so structure AA service that people don't find out about all the opportunities. Cooperating with the professional community, going out and meeting with priests and I'll tell you something that was very shocking to me. And I think AA blew it. I'll say this, and it was during my time, and unfortunately, it's just a lot of old thinking. And by the way, my statement I'm going to make is not against singleness of purpose. I believe AA is for alcoholics. I don't care what other problems you have. But we don't know anything about other problems. If you're an alcoholic and some of your other problems go away as a result of AA, great. But we're not here to help people who are not alcoholic, who have other problems. But let's face it, a lot of alcoholics wind up in drug court. A lot of alcoholics wind up in veterans courts. When drug courts first appeared on the scene, going back really 20 years ago, 25 years ago, AA would not participate with them or cooperate. For the most part, maybe 99.9% out of 100%, because name was drug court. WI offenders go there. Meanwhile, many people who are there for drug-related offenses are alcoholic. I'm not saying to bring drug addicts to AA if they're not alcoholic. I'm just saying last week or 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, I was asked the Florida drug court judges for all counties once a month have a brown bag lunch. And they get together on Zoom, all the different drug court judges, and they share about what's going on and everything else. And one of them had reached out to me and asked me to participate as somebody who had been through the court system and on probation when I was younger. And I was shocked to hear 100% of the judges online have never met someone from AA in the last 2 years. 100%. Like, what are we doing? It's just because it's called drug court does not make it illegal for us to cooperate with them. There's a lot of alcoholics who wind up there. So what I'm saying is there's all different jobs to do in AA service. And we should try to let people be aware of that. As a DCM, should I be servicing meetings and groups? No. Groups don't have anything to, meetings have nothing to do with the structure. Meetings have a right to exist. They serve a different purpose, but a meeting is not a group. And you're the DCM of the groups. Now, we could dig further down into that. Everybody who registers at a meeting gets a group number, and sometimes people think they're a group, but they're really just a meeting, but you're there to serve meetings. Group, sorry. Can you explain rotation for GSRs and why following the 2-year panel is important? Yes, we have a 2-year term of service. In most areas, the GSR has the same rotation as the delegate and the officers whenever your area elections are. Sometimes groups change that up. Why is it important that it be the same? I wouldn't say it's critical, but it is important that you get used to a certain rhythm. Again, when I think about this thing with new GSRs, and I said about getting, like, my complaint I'm about to make is not about Area 15. It's about all areas that are not doing this. Because now that I see some areas doing it, I think it's remarkable. Like, I'm just curious. A few of you can chime in. Like, would you say that most groups are electing their GSR in November or December to start a January term? When? Okay. Okay. So let's use this example. It's September, right? Let's just say your group is electing a new GSR, right? A brand new GSR. If you're electing a GSR whenever you can get one, it usually means, well, it's the last GSR. Kind of what that means. There was not an alternate that did 2 years who now can do the job. So let's just say right now, what's it like in Area 15 if tonight we were a home group and we elected a new GSR? Well, I'll tell you one thing right away. Nobody has told that person they're not going to get a hotel room because the block's been sold out for 2 months. Nope. Nobody tells people that. Nobody. Like, if you're not a GSR at the time of at the last quarterly, you're out. Not getting a hotel room at that place. The other thing is, correction service is built around the idea to make AA inside a correctional facility look as much like outside so that it'll be familiar to the member. That when they go to an outside meeting, it'll be no different. There's a big book and how it works and a chairperson and a secretary, and sometimes it's a speaker meeting and sometimes it's a big book meeting, but that is the purpose of correctional facility meetings. And I think one would argue that for anybody coming to their first AA meeting, it can be I'm talking about a regular meeting. Just welcome. Your life's going so well. This Wednesday night, you showed up at your first AA meeting. That's how good life is going. And we know a lot of people in the parking lot, they're sitting in their car, smoking an extra cigarette, looking in the rearview mirror, seeing if they know anybody, seeing if any cars look familiar. Like, we know what it's like to just go to your first meeting. Think about the new GSR who's going to their first assembly. They have no idea what they're walking into. Some of them maybe definitely, might know someone who's really active in service and get an idea. But now what I see, yes, GSR orientations at assembly weekends are nice, but I love these areas now that have GSR orientation, like on Zoom a month before the assembly, so that anybody who's never been to an assembly can get walked through what's going to happen. Like, you might not have a hotel room now, but this is how it works next time. Like, Friday night, you don't have to be there, but you might want to be there. And Saturday, these are the meetings. And as a GSR, it might look confusing, but these are the meetings you probably might want to go to. This is what happens on Sunday, and this is how we conduct business. There's a couple of areas now that have started these online GSR orientations or assembly orientations, and I just think it's an amazing idea. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, because it's already in one of these areas, it's already a controversy because it's not official. We love everything to be official in AA. So in one of these areas that has an assembly orientation, that area's officers refused to do one, and so someone is doing their own. And guess what? It's better attended than most of the district meetings in that area. So, like, we're so afraid of new ideas, it just drives me crazy. Be on the same schedule as all the officers that just got elected. Then you'll see the progression of what's going on. Instead of just entering like at a time, let's face it, if you come in every other year, if a new GSR appears at the October quarterly, you've been at nothing, you know nobody, and you have a vote for the new delegate. Yeah. The line between judgment and judgmental, why judgment is important. Yeah, I mean, listen, I said it. Some of my friends would not make good delegates. You might be an election where your service sponsor is standing for something, but you think someone else would be a better candidate for that position. Um, you know, I talked about, not taking other people's inventory. I heard that when I was in and out for years until an old timer said, yeah, if you want to live, yeah, you're going to take people's inventory and you're going to stick with the winners. The only way you know who's the winners is by taking inventory, and you will determine who are the winners, like, and judgment is required. You don't need to be judgmental. You don't need to be judgmental publicly. But for your own decisions that you're making, there's nothing wrong with some judgment. Explain the function of a DCM. Well, it's in the service manual, but it's really important that I'm not saying you need to have a service sponsor, but you talk to someone who's active in service in your area and your district, so you find out what kind of district do you have. Are you a DCM that chairs your own meeting? Because we have those. I talked about them, where every DCM is like their own district chair. And usually that's when districts are small, are small geographically. Here, districts are large geographically. Sub-districts and then DCMs, so you'd have to ask me, what's the function of a DCM where? In Area 15, which would be very different than an area somewhere else. So you have to talk to someone who's been a DCM here. One of the greatest reasons for a DCM, it seems to me, in Area 15 is they're the only ones that can make motions. A GSR cannot make a motion at the assembly. I'm not speaking for or against that, but that's definitely one of the functions of a DCM here. A DCM here does not chair their own DCM meeting. They kind of take care of the district, rallying the groups in their sub-district. So you're there to be like an advisor without being micromanaging to the groups in your sub-district. So explain what the function of a GSR is. Well, GSR is easier as far as your number one responsibility. I know we've created all kinds of things. The GSR chairs the business meeting. In some places, yes. Some places, no. The GSR is the traditions advisor of the group. In some places, yes. In some places, no. It doesn't say that anywhere. The real purpose of the GSR is to go to the area assembly and the district meeting and bring information back to the group. And also, there may be some things that the district or area don't want to vote on until the GSR has time to talk to their group. And then the other main function is every February when the final conference agenda comes out for the General Service Conference. And, I try to stress this, and I think we do such a bad job of it overall. We're so fascinated with delegates and trustees and past delegates and past trustees. We've become like the College of Cardinals. That's what we've become like. Did you get your red hat? You have your red hat now. You'll always be able to say you had a red hat. It drives me crazy because the delegate almost has an easier job than a GSR. And what do I mean by that? If I get elected delegate, which I was a delegate, I get the background information. I distribute it however my area distributes background information for all those agenda items. But for me, I read it. Maybe I read it 2 or 3 times. Maybe some issues I read 3 times, some I just read once. But then I know that in my area, I might meet with districts, or I might have an assembly that's dedicated towards getting feedback from my area. And I know that happens. And it's a pretty decent time schedule. I got my background material in February. I have until the conference starts to really read it, but I probably want to read it at least one time so I can. But then I know when my meeting with the districts is, and that's specifically carved out just about the conference. I know when my assembly is, and that's specifically carved out that I'm going to get feedback on the conference. Not so if you're a GSR. The background and agenda usually come out around Valentine's Day, usually around February 15th. So if I get the background, maybe the business meeting in February is left. Maybe. If it's the 3rd and 4th, whatever, of the month of your meeting. If your business meeting is the 1st or 2nd of any day, February's gone. Now you have March. You have one business meeting in March of your group. And the average group doesn't like to waste any more time than they have to in a business meeting to begin with. If you're a new GSR and no one is telling you that like October, November, start coming up with a plan with your group. And the other big mistake people make is going through the whole agenda. The only reason to go through the whole agenda is to realize the 80% that your groups don't care about. That you as a trusted servant should make the right decision. Well, if you really want your groups, if you really want to set your group on fire, like throw a hand grenade in the middle of the table, tell them in December you want to have a special meeting because they're going to change the big book in New York. Or they're going to change the preamble. Or they're going to do this. But try to have a plan that maybe you should have an extra business meeting in March or February to go over some of these conference items. But we do such a poor job of communicating that to GSRs that they just shell-shocked. GSR so important? Well, the GSR is important because do you know how many people called me about the preamble and I asked them, was your GSR at the assembly? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, did your group send word that you didn't like the new version and you like the old version? Yeah, I have no idea. Well, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Having experienced lack of enthusiasm from groups in a sub-district to participate in service of any kind, e.g. GSRs, etc., I've run out of ideas to pique interest in expressing groups and representing groups via GSR. Suggestions? Sure. I'll go back to something I heard a past general manager and past trustee say a long time ago. Service doesn't have to be like an 80-mile walk through the desert. I know that some of us come from this thing where if it's not painful, it's no progress, but it's ridiculous. You want to get some people together, whatever, have a recovery-related event that you don't even have an event about the concepts or the traditions. Like throw them to the side for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Have some kind of get-together that's just about service or AA and recovery, like bring some kind of fun to the table. You know, I'll tell you what you should do. At my current company, which is the last company I'll ever work for, 5 years ago when I went there and they recruited me, I had heard about their chairman and I heard he was a little eccentric and that's why I wanted to work for him. And I heard he didn't like status quo and a lot of this stuff. And when it was my time to ask questions, when they flew me out there to talk to the board, I said, well, could you tell me about your business plan for the next couple of years, or at least next year? And he said, well, it's funny you asked that. He said, what I would suggest is you read our 3 biggest competitors' business plans and then know I'm doing exactly the opposite. Like I'm doing exactly the opposite of what they do. So like the best way I can answer is this: whatever they've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years isn't working. Take some time to really think out of the box and come up with something new.
All audio and video files on the district6aa.org website or the District 6 in Area 15 YouTube channel are for personal use only. Reproduction, distribution, and commercial use are not permitted. In accordance with District 6 current practice, no faces are shown in our videos and audio is scrubbed for anonymity prior to publishing. Contributors whose voices are heard have given consent to be recorded and published consistent with our terms of use. Opinions expressed by the presenter are their own and do not necessarily represent the group conscience of District 6 as a whole.